Hello, my name's John Beecham and I've been very kindly invited by the Warsaw Rising Museum to speak to this year's winner of the Medal of the Courier of Warsaw. May I introduce Toomas Hendrik Ilves. Hello.
Yeah, hello.
So, to get straight into the thick of it, you have been awarded with this year's Medal of the Courier from Warsaw, the second edition. How does that feel?
Well, it's quite an honor to receive it. As someone who has been trying to promote relations with Poland and to sort of promote Poland as a key country in Europe because of the importance it has to my own country, Estonia, then it's always nice to have someone say, "Oh, he did something," rather than, I mean, being recognized is always nice.
I mean, you visited Poland as many as 18 times. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
That was during
your presidency.
Yeah.
Obviously, you must have been here a lot more times than during your presidency. I mean, how important were or still are the ties between Tallinn and Warsaw?
Well, they're extremely important. I mean, first of all, just historically, they go back a long, long way already, because even before World War I, both Estonian and Polish officers had undergone the same education, and that military education, that is. And so when Estonia and Poland had the chance to become free, I mean, in both cases, the officers that had been trained in the Russian Empire used their knowledge to fight the Russian Empire. So that was, but it's, I mean, for current times, I mean, beginning with, say, the impact of Solidarność on thinking in Estonia, but then beyond that, we have a problem, I think, in all of the Central and Eastern European countries that we tend to be dismissed and ignored, and Poland is harder to ignore because it's the one big country of the East. And the stock expression I use is that, which kind of sums it up as a metaphor, is that Poland is the only large country in Europe where if you say mass deportations, the people know what you're talking about. Whereas Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, we've all been subjected to mass deportations, people put into cattle cars and sent to Siberia. But if you talk about it, well, there's the kind of story about Estonians talking about it in Sweden, and the Swedes saying, "Why didn't you call the police?" So the people in Poland get it. And that has been part of my approach for as long as I've had anything to do with my country's foreign policy. I certainly, when I became foreign minister
let me check.
7 years ago, 26 years ago, I made Poland a priority for us. It had not been. We had been just looking in our immediate neighborhood, Finland, Sweden. I said, no, we cannot ever ignore Poland. It's the one country that really matters for us in ways that we don't even comprehend. And I've pursued that ever since, and that is why I did everything possible to have good relations with Poland, with different presidents of Poland, who were quite different in their political views regarding Poland, but we all had in common an understanding of the threats facing our security. I was close to speak of previous presidents, both to Bronisław Komorowski and to President Lech Kaczynski. Lech Kaczynski called me up the morning immediately after Russia invaded Georgia and said, "What do we do?" And then we drafted a statement, which then was promptly ignored by everyone. And the Finns refused to sign it. So the next morning, President Kaczynski called me up and said, they ignored it. What do we do? I made a little joke. I said, oh, we can always fly there. He said, I'll be there in the morning. So we had a good relationship.
I mean, much like Jan Nowak-Jeziorański, you also, forged alliances which aimed to, bolster security, Euro-Atlantic ties, as well as, international security, especially in light of Russia, and nowadays especially in light of Russian aggression. I mean, do you think the West has kind of forgotten these values of solidarity, of international solidarity?
Well, I think there are several points. When it comes to things such as democracy, freedom, these are not abstract notions to the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. People who have grown up and lived for 80, 90 years in sort of pleasant, NATO-guaranteed, Marshall Plan financed security don't realize how good they have it, or have had it. Whereas we know the value of democracy and what it means not to have democracy, what it means not to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And so there is that difference. I actually think of, if you know if you've read Thucydides and the Peloponnesian Wars, there's an island he writes about, Melos, which is taken over by the Athenians. Well, the Athenians come and threaten it, and then the Melians who live there say, well, this is against the principles that we have in our relations with you, Athens. And the Athenians say, too bad. And they say, well, we stand by our principles. And the Athenians said, oh, okay. So they invaded, killed all the men, and took all the women and children as slaves, leading Thucydides to say that the strong do what they will, and the weak do what they must, which is probably one of the only aphorisms or any truths of foreign policy there is. But if you think about these countries between Russia and the West, I call them it's the Melian archipelago. All the little countries that have been for 1,000 years, from one side or the other, been subjugated and forced to do what they must by their neighbors. I mean, when it comes to, defending human rights and democracy is a never-ending battle. I mean, I think it's Ronald Reagan said that, that every generation has to relearn that. I would add to that every generation has to relearn that other people haven't learned, that the tyranny can always raise its head. We tend to be very self-congratulatory about what we have accomplished, with good reason. On the other hand, we must help those who are not there yet. Just as so many people helped Poland, helped Estonia, helped other countries in Central and Eastern Europe when we were subjugated. Today it is Ukraine that is fighting an imperialistic, genocidal, brutal regime that is just basically is bringing about the same kind of killing fields that existed here in Poland in 1944 during the uprising. And so it is our obligation not to rest on our laurels, but to help those fight despotism, tyranny, crimes against humanity. And so this is, I think, an ongoing mission as well for the museum.
Yourself and Jan Nowak-Jeziorański, you both worked for Radio Free Europe, not at the same time. Jan Nowak was head of the Polish section. You yourself, between 88 and 93, were head of the Estonian section of Radio Free Europe. I mean, how How did you go about your mission while in Munich?
Well, I mean, before I was the head of the service, I was in the research and analysis department. So I was there actually almost 10 years. But what I tried to do was that I realized that what people needed and wanted was objective truth, even if unvarnished, rather than to say communists are bad. I mean, everyone thought communists were bad, but I mean to say, okay, this is what happened here, and this is what happened there. We're free of the ideological tinge that so poisoned objective reporting under communist domination. That was basically the approach. I said, we should just be the English language BBC.
Yeah. I asked because obviously during that time, I mean, you were there at a moment when the Berlin Wall fell down, and we had the first partially free elections in Poland. I mean, the Soviets would frequently block or jam signals from Radio Free Europe, and I'm sure that both yours and Jan Nowak's voices would have been muzzled by whatever aperture the Soviets would try to employ. In that respect, I mean, how did you find that mission, and how important is it to keep telling the truth despite the circumstances?
Well, it's getting tougher, I should say, because then you had a basis of comparison. You could hear this nonsense that they were promoting. And then you had something which was, well, I would say balanced, because you would hear, I mean, when you're talking about negative aspects of life in the West, I mean, this was new. It's like, oh, well, they're not doing propaganda because they're talking about both sides. Now, today, we are so flooded, especially via social media, by simply fake news, that it's much more difficult to figure out what is true and what is not. And I think that's a serious problem we will be facing from now on.
What would you say to today's generation in terms of fighting fake news and striving for the truth?
Well, it's hard to say, because I mean, the answer would be to read more, but in that, how much time do people have? They prefer, I mean, they look at, you know, soundbite meme and sound bites and memes, and so I think it's a serious problem that we face.
Coming back to the medal and the medal of the Kuriera of Warsaw, Jan Nowak-Jeziorański, did you ever manage to meet Jan Nowak?
I did, but it was only kind of a fleeting meeting, because he was quite retired by the time I started. But I mean, we met as, okay, here's a young guy from Radio Free Europe, and here's the grand old man from Radio Free Europe. I mean, he was working at Radio Free Europe before I was born, so it's okay. There was a big age difference between us. Of
course, but when you were aspiring for NATO membership of Estonia, seeing what Jeziorański had done with his ties in the United States, did you manage to meet him during that period as well, in the run-up to NATO membership?
Yes. Well, I was in Washington in the 1990s, and then that's where we met.
And what did you talk about the first time you met him?
Well, I think he was very interested in what Estonia was doing. I mean, that was he was more. I was kind of just providing answers. So.
Okay. And Estonia at that time, what was Estonia doing? How
crawling out of the wreckage, basically. Yeah. I would say the 90s. All of our countries were just trying to get out from the mess that we had inherited from 50 years of misrule.
What lessons can we learn from Jan Nowak-Jeziorański and how he was so dedicated towards his own country and to the security of Poland and the Euro-Atlantic relationship?
Well, first of all, never give up. Secondly, I think that, well, I don't know, I don't want to sort of impute to him what I felt, but basically, if you do what you like, and what you like is trying to get your country to be free and become a democracy, if that's what you want to do, if you enjoy doing that, then you're a very lucky person.
And my final question, I would like to ask you, what would you say to the laureate of the next Kuriera of Warsaw Medal? What would your message be to future laureates?
Well, it's the same, is that, I mean, the defending freedom, democracy, human rights is not only noble, but it's really something that is worth doing.
Mm-hmm. And my very last question. You have been to the Warsaw Rising Museum a number of times, I'm sure. In terms of the exhibition and what the mission of the museum is, how does that resonate with you?
Well, it's absolutely vital, because in fact, if you don't know what happened, then it might happen again. I mean, I see this when I teach at the university. And since I spent the 90s trying to get Estonia into the European Union and NATO, and then I teach and I have students who are not even born when Estonia was in NATO and the European Union, you go, well, you don't know what you missed. I mean, not to mention the communist period, but when your people don't even know what it was like, I mean, the very difficult times that, of course, Jan Nowak and Lech Walesa and Václav Havel and in the Czech Republic went through, I mean, even before we were on the table, as it were, as part of the menu. People take it for granted. They say, oh, well, we've been in there for 25 years. I mean, no, I mean, it was hard work to get there. It was not clear we would get in there. There was a lot of opposition. People said, well, we don't really want to offend the Russians. I mean, why would we take these countries into NATO? Why would... Helmut Kohl was against even Baltic membership in the European Union, let alone NATO. So when you have people who've grown up, born in the European Union, born under the NATO umbrella, they need to know where we've been. So I think that the function of a museum is not, in this case, I mean, this is the Uprising Museum, but I think we need to understand what even our more immediate past and be able to see what happened.
Yeah. Thank you very much, President Toomasowi Hendrikowi Ilvesowi, for coming into the museum's library today to talk about the award of the Medal of the Kuriera from Warsaw. Many thanks.